kids are not responsible for their parents' emotional
Yes.
well-being. So we do not want to put that burden on them. Their role is to be kids and to enjoy the summer. Kids.
Welcome to the Divorce Discussions Podcast, where professionals share practical guidance to help you move through divorce with clarity and confidence. Let's get into the discussion. School is almost out for the summer, and while your kids are probably counting down the days, you might be lying awake counting all the things that could go wrong. Who has them each week? Who's paying for camp? What happens when the plans change without a conversation? The truth is, during the school year, the routine keeps everything held together, but summer kind of blows that structure wide open. And if you are co parenting this summer, it can feel like stepping into the unknown without a map. So if you want to get ahead of that chaos before it starts, this is the episode for you. Welcome to Divorce Discussions. I'm Angie Weber, the director of the Divorce Support Collective, where we seek to reimagine the process of divorce through collaboration and support. Today, I am joined by Adina Lebowitz, one of the amazing members of the Divorce Support Collective, and she's also a family mediator and parenting coach. Her primary goal is to help families find less stress and more peace in their co-parenting, which is probably why you clicked on this episode today. She supports parents as they are adjusting to separation or divorce and beyond, whether they're facing day-to-day co-parenting challenges or dealing with the impacts of stress in their life. She's also contributing author to the 2024 internationally best-selling book, Building Bridges of Hope, Overcoming Trauma in Family Law Cases. So, Adina, you have so much knowledge, so much expertise, and I can't wait for you to share so much with our listeners today. So, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yes. Well, again, I just know for me, even when summer comes, I have this idea of, oh, I have more time, more flexibility because the kids don't have to be at certain places at certain times necessarily. But then it kind of brings on its own challenges. And especially if you're co-parenting, I mean, what are you seeing as some of the most common challenges that co-parents kind of get hit in the face with when it comes to summer that maybe they didn't think about before?
Yeah, probably just waiting too long to have those conversations with the other parent about what is summer going to look like for our kids, because we want them to remember the positive memories, the joys of being a little more laid back in the summertime, and not that their parents were constantly in conflict and every transition was really, really stressful. So we want to get ahead of that and make sure that their communication's happening well in advance of when school gets out. I know your listeners probably all across the country here in Minnesota, schools don't get out till beginning of June, but in other communities, maybe they're going to be out by mid to late May. So we want to get ahead of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought up that point because I know you're a parent coach. I'm a parent coach in my main business. And there's actually a lot of research out there that says it's not necessarily the divorce that is going to cause the trauma for the kids. It's high conflict co-parenting situations that do it. And so if we can reduce the co-parenting conflict as much as possible, that is best case scenario because again, then we can really create stable foundations for our children as well. So while we're not going to get all into that, although I know you have so many tips and suggestions and strategies for those situations. Let's say a listener is like, wait a minute, Adina, summer already started and we haven't talked about it yet. How can I kind of how can I start that conversation with my co-parent so it doesn't lead to further conflict during the summer?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, each family is so unique. Their kids may be different ages, how far apart the parents live from one another. So the simplest schedule is that, you're just gonna maintain the same schedule that you were doing during the year. Maybe if you have school age kids here in Minnesota, it's really popular to have the 5225, which is the split week schedule. Um, some people might have a week on, week off, but we are finding that a lot of parents live a great distance from each other. And so summer's a really special time. A parent who wasn't involved with day-to-day parenting during the school year maybe has a big bulk of time during the summer. They might do 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or they could have a whole month with the kids, and they really haven't seen them except for a weekend here and there during the school year. So that's kind of a big adjustment for the kids that now they're going to be in another household. So we want to make sure that we kind of talk about that also with the kids before they do that big transition to the other parent's house and try to keep as much the same as possible. I know we talk about co-parenting and parallel parenting, and especially for parents who live quite a distance apart. They're kind of like, well, don't tell me what to do. I'm going to have my own rules for the kids at my house. But if we can maintain some consistency about, bedtimes or screen time, things like that, the kids aren't lost in that confusion of, it's different here. It's not what I'm used to.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you bring up a really great point of, we need to talk to our co-parent about what are the expectation, how is summer going to look like, as best as we can. And it's also really important to talk to the kids about it too, of, hey, summer is coming up. This is kind of what the schedule looks like, because we also need to understand that these kids, they have the routine. Hey, bed at 8, you get up at 7, you go to school, you come home, you do your chores or your responsibilities, we eat dinner, you do homework, and then, bedtime again. But I think it's really important to have those conversations with our kids as well, because they're coming out of this big routine. And while they're super excited about it, yeah, that can kind of have them all over the place. But I really want to kind of shift into a little bit more about the co parent thing, because I know you talk about how, co parents need to make a shift as they're going into summer. And you kind of already hit on some of those things of like, well, I get to do what I want to do when they're in my care because it's my house, it's my rules. But maybe what are some other shifts that they need to be prepared for? And I'm specifically interested in the fact that you mentioned there might be a very lengthy amount of time that the kids are going with the other parent. And as excited as the kids may be, that parent who's with them a majority of the time during the school year might be kind of having a lot of emotions about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things around that you want to set up ahead of time is how frequently can that other parent communicate with the kids? So you
Mm.
don't want them calling every single night at dinner because that can be really disruptive. The kids need some time to settle in and just, this is my home for the summer. So it keeps reminding them if you're checking in every single day. So kind of to set up a schedule, I'm going to call Mondays and Thursdays, or I'm going to call Sunday afternoon. So they kind of know when to expect that, and they can be ready and excited to share with you what they've done that week. Maybe they went to day camp, maybe they had swim lessons or horseback riding for the very first time, and they really, really want to share with you about that. But it doesn't have to be immediate. It doesn't have to be every night at dinner, which, like I said, can be kind of disruptive to the parent who they're staying with during the summer.
Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of have you elaborate a little bit more on that too, because there might be some listeners who are thinking, Adina, they're my kids. I need to know what's going on. I want to be, and what am I supposed to do with all of my time if they're not here because I'm so used to being here all the time with them? What are some suggestions or tips that can maybe support them emotionally if they are having a hard time with longer stretches of not communicating with their kids during the summer?
Well, absolutely. That is a really great time for self-care for yourself. Like explore those hobbies that, as you've been a busy single parent all year, take some time to, like go to the beach or do some watercolor painting or just read a book or just explore the things that you want to take time to do that when you're on duty 24/7 taking care of those kids, maybe you didn't have time for during the year. And then another great tip, when we're apart from our kids is if you do have a daily practice of meditation, just send them some loving energy and
Mm.
just, I think the universe responds to our positive energy. So believe that the very best is going to happen, even if you have some concerns, they don't like the bunk beds at this other parent's house, or they don't like that they have to be with these step siblings. Just wrap them in love that everything is working out in the best way possible. So if you send them kind of worrying, stressed energy, they're going to pick up on that. Even if it's at a distance, even if it's not a text message, if you're sending that worrying, stressed energy, your kids are going to pick up on that. But if you're sending that calm, loving energy that I truly believe that you are going to have a great summer and things are going to be okay and they're going to work out for the best and you're going to make new friends and have new experiences and learn amazing new things, that is what will be fulfilled in their world.
Yeah, and again, great reminders, great tips. That self-care piece is not to feel guilty. It's really to have that time by yourself and explore those hobbies. And I think that's just such an important reminder because we don't want to put extra stress on our kids too, where if they're going to the other parents, they feel like, well, I know that, mom or dad is back home and they miss me because they keep telling me how much they miss me. So I feel kind of guilty for having
Mhm.
fun over here because I'm worried about the parent. Because, like you kind of started out with, we want to make sure our kids have the best summer as possible, that they have fun. And that's really what it's all about, right? And that's
Mhm.
why at the Divorce Support Collective, too, we have so many different types of professionals, even beyond the, signing the decree, that can really help support you emotionally. If you feel like maybe your friends and family aren't the right area, we have, different, we have parenting coaches, we have divorce coaches who can really help fill that gap so it's not putting additional pressure onto the kids.
Absolutely. You brought up a really good point. Our kids are not responsible for their parents' emotional
Yes.
well-being. So we do not want to put that burden on them. Their role is to be kids and to enjoy the summer.
Absolutely. I love that. Now, the other thing that comes with summer, though, is expenses because there's day camps or away camps, activities, vacations. Obviously, here in Minnesota, that's like the prime time to go because it's actually nice out. So maybe going up north or going to other states. But how should co parents be handling who pays for what? And again, when should those conversations happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully in your parenting plan, it lists out what your split is. Is it going to be a 50-50 split on these summer expenses, or is it going to be 20-80, or just being consistent with what you've already got in your plan for the year?
Yeah.
If it's a big expense like an overnight camp, yes, absolutely. You want to have those conversations well in advance. A lot of organizations, maybe it's a faith-based summer camp, away camp, they might have scholarships and you can apply for those. So it's not such a big burden to your family. But if you're sending several kids, that could be a fairly large expense. Usually those deposits have to be paid 3 to 6 months in advance. So hopefully, maybe after winter break, you've already started those conversations in January because the kids are missing their friends from last summer and they're like, I'm going back, right? I'm going to get to go back for the summer camp. Then
Yeah.
by March, they're having those registrations and then probably monthly payment plans until those summer camps are starting in either June or July. So
Yeah.
hopefully you've had those conversations well in advance about how you're going to split the expenses for those. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and as we're talking about, have the conversations early, again, we can have the best intentions. It doesn't always mean we're gonna, do it perfectly the first or second or third or fourth time. But like, how far in advance would you suggest that people to start having these conversations? Is it going to be during winter break that we're talking about summer break, or what's your best suggestion?
Yeah, generally by March, that's when the enrollments are happening. That's when you're getting the notices, at least about the local day camps and activities. Maybe they go to some theater camp or they go to a music camp or they go to a sports camp. Usually those registrations are happening in about March. But definitely, if you haven't had those conversations by May, we're a couple days away from the start of May. You want to be having those conversations about what are our transitions going to look like? How far do we have to travel to get from one household to the other household? We probably don't want to do that on a Friday afternoon in the most intense rush hour traffic. So can somebody's work schedule allow them to get off at noon to get to where they need to be, or maybe do it on a Saturday? I was working with a family a couple years ago. They lived on the Jersey Shore. So they had to get from one parent's house in Philadelphia to the Jersey Shore. Well, that is super busy on summer weekends. And so they just had to work that out because, the kids are already stressed about doing the exchanges and then to sit in traffic and know that their parents are stressed while they're getting back and forth. So they worked out some times that they could do the commute to the other parent's house that it wasn't the peak traffic time.
Yeah, I was laughing when you were talking about even here in Minnesota because we have two seasons. We have winter and construction season, right? So it's like no matter where you go in this state, you're probably going to run into traffic because of construction during the summer. So that is a great reminder, too, because again, I think those are things that we don't always think about because school is such a routine and we
Mhm.
know exactly where they're going, when they're getting dropped off, when they're getting picked up. But when it comes to summer, you're like, they may have parents who live further away, or maybe they have a second house or cabin that they're going to during the summer. So sometimes that travel conversation needs to happen as well, because I know kids, again, it puts so much extra stress on them. And then it takes away from the joy and the fun of summer because they constantly feel like they're having to be handed off here or there.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so obviously, communication is tricky in co-parenting in general. But as we kind of already talked about, summer has so many other little tidbits that can kind of throw a wrench in things. So can you give some tips or suggestions on how co-parents can have good communication during the summer?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things we were talking about is the day camp. So, like you said, with school, we kind of know what the school day schedule is, if there's after school care, things like that. But maybe now we're going to a day camp and maybe the hours are only 9 to 1 or 9 to 3, and they don't have the same after school care. So, definitely want to speak about that early on. Because maybe the other parent doesn't have somebody who can pick up at that time. They can't adjust their work hours for summer to cover that after school care. So you don't want to just sign the kids up for day camp expecting the other parent's going to be able to accommodate that schedule if they don't have that flexibility in the work schedule. But especially we want to treat the other parent with the same respect that we'd like to receive ourselves. So as far as giving notice about vacations and things like that, we generally want to give about 2 months notice if we want to take an extended period of time. Generally, in a parenting plan, you're going to get about 2 weeks of vacation per year. That can be split up. Maybe I do 10 days at this time and, 5 days at another time, or maybe it's a week here and a week there. But you want to try to give the other parent at least 2 months notice. Hey, I'm planning to book some flights to take the kids out of the area or even a long road trip. Um, I just want to make sure these dates work for you. You don't have the grandparents coming to town at that same time, and you were going to ask me for that time off for your vacation. Having those conversations well in advance and not just assuming that, well, I think they're going to be away, so it should be okay for me to book travel. That can get really expensive if you have to suddenly change something that you've already booked and pay those change fees that, oh, these dates don't work. I have to rebook my flights.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I always let when working with co-parents, we hope and wish for the best, but we know that it's not always going to be butterflies and rainbows. So there might be a listener right now saying, "Yeah, Adina, that sounds great. My co-parents, they that's not how they fly. Like they push back on everything. If I mentioned a day camp, they didn't want to pay for it. They didn't see the value in it. What if you have that co-parent who just is continuously pushing back on everything you are trying to plan for the summer? What do you do?"
Yeah, well, you can definitely schedule a mediation. We can have that conversation in a room with them. Sometimes they just they want to dig in their heels and fight back with the person they've been in conflict for a while. But in a mediation setting, we can set a safe space where they can hear the information from a third party neutral. So maybe they won't have quite that, I'm going to dig in my heels sort of reaction if they hear it from the mediator rather than from the other parent. And then really focusing on why is it in the child's best interest? Maybe my child has a passion for playing the trumpet and they really, really want to go to this music camp. If we focus on what's in it for the child rather than the conflict between the parents, and they can see that it's of value and benefit to their child, they might be a little bit more willing to say yes to that.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think knowing that you two can also mediate those conversations because sometimes it's just so much better again to have that professional in there or that third party to listen that's not a family or friend, because we've talked about that on the podcast before about how sometimes they can be a little bit too emotionally involved in these situations, so they can kind of help you spiral a little bit more than find a resolution.
Mhm.
So I think that's a great reminder that you can utilize mediation even after the divorce, even when you're just navigating
Mhm.
co-parenting versus just being like, oh, I don't have any additional support once the decree is signed, especially if you've been co-parenting for years. But of course, kids go through different changes and seasons, and that means that what they need and what they want may differ as well. Okay, so talk us through a little bit about how you specifically help co-parents. If there's some co-parents on here right now and they're like, oh gosh, Adina, I think I need you because summer is coming or it recently started and I am feeling all the feels about how it's going so far with my co-parent or just some things that come up. Really, how do you help co-parents?
Yeah, basically by giving them a safe space to be heard. A lot of times they'll get into these intense reactions because they don't feel that they're being heard. So I always create space so each side can be heard. I practice a collaborative style of mediation where we focus on interests rather than positions. So it's not, you want this day camp and I want that day camp. We focus on why do you want this? Why does this matter? And when we get to interests rather than positions, it gives us a little bit more room to be able to come up with um, solutions that will meet the needs. When we get into the interest, we understand the needs. When we're only talking about positions, that's where people can get really locked in and into their polar opposite positions. So when we focus on the interests, we understand the needs, we can come to better solutions for the family.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm sure you give lots of tools and strategies and ideas to these co-parents as well, so that they can continue to put the kids' interest as top of mind, because that, again, which we've already talked about, is really the main focus of everything. But when emotions get into play, because again, we talk a lot about how there's three sides to divorce. There's financial, there's legal, and then there's the emotional side, and that is about 80% of divorce. And just because you sign that decree doesn't mean that those emotions aren't still going to come in, especially in co-parenting situations. So I absolutely love that. Now, do you have any additional tips for our parents? Again, if they're feeling anxious maybe about their kids being away for a long time, or just the uncertainty of the summer schedules that are about to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this might sound really old-fashioned, but you can go back to real snail mail. So that might be fun for the kids if you're sending a postcard or a letter in the mail and they can receive that, especially if they're going to be at the other parent's house for several weeks. That's really, really fun that they're going to get mail and they can open it and they can send you something back. A little bit different way to communicate than just the text messages. To make it a little more fun, they can draw a picture of what their day was like or something like that. That can be really nice. And then as far as being anxious, just to come back to, just wrap them in love, that you really, see them having a good experience and they're not going to be feeling like they're responsible for your emotional care. The other parent is also an adult and they can take care of their own emotional needs. So the children don't have to be responsible for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I kind of want to come back to this like longer time at the parents, because again, during school, stuff has to be kind of structured,
Mhm.
especially because they're on a schedule of when they have to be at school. Besides all the random days off that they have at school, which throws me through a loop most of the time. But would you kind of suggest too that summer is an opportunity to change things up again if both co-parents agree? Like maybe we start changing the schedule just for summer so they are in one spot for maybe a week at a time versus the back and forth so much during the week?
Yeah, I see kind of both. I mean, some people will have a longer period of time so they don't have to be splitting the week and going back and forth quite so much in the summer. They really have some time to settle in, sleep in, just really get to relax in that summertime. So that's something you can try. Um, but I've also seen that there's more exchanges because, like I was saying, well, like maybe with the daycare camp, our day camp schedule, that has the different drop-offs and pickup times, then we're seeing more of kind of the helicopter parenting of, oh, well, I can come in and take them and drop them off and pick them up at these times, even if you can't get off work. And
Mm-hmm.
then the kids are having more exchanges. And I mentioned to parents that the more exchanges there are, the more opportunities there are for conflict. So really we want to build that trust that the other parent is going to be able to figure this out. Maybe they can carpool with a neighbor whose kid has, the same activity or something like that. Be able to build that trust that the other parent can take care of this, that they can manage it, that you don't have to swoop in and be filling in for them unless they ask for additional help for that.
Sure. No, I think that's a really good perspective on it too. And, we've talked about the day camps or the vacations, and we talked about the activities and just how the schedule looks a little bit different. But is there anything else that you've come into contact with through your, clients and things that maybe we haven't covered? Maybe even how do we start getting back into that routine after summer?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is swaps. So we're talking about being so laid back in summertime, and maybe there's you want to get to the cabin up north a little bit more frequently, or other relatives are dropping into town. Sometimes people are asking to swap too much,
Mm,
so that can be very disruptive. We thought we had a schedule, and then every other week you're saying, no, not this weekend. Can we do it next weekend?
yeah.
Or I need this weekend. And, that can create a lot of confusion, and the kids then aren't really sure where they're going to be or what's going on. They want to stay in touch with their friends too, and they're like, oh, now we're going back up to Brainerd, and I'm going to be far away, and I can't go to the soccer game with them this weekend. So some of the co-parenting apps have a feature about swap, and you can request a swap, and then the other person can accept or deny it. And we want to make sure that those requests aren't too frequent. We want to try to accommodate them if at all possible. The same, like I was saying, you want to be treated with the same respect. Treat your other parent with the same respect that you want to be treated with. But so we want to try to accommodate a request for a swap, but we also want to be respectful that we're not swapping to requesting swaps too much, because that
Yeah.
can be really disruptive to the schedule. And then as far as getting back into the regular schedule for fall. Again, probably by early to mid-August, you want to be talking about that. And then the schools will post a list for school supplies and stuff like that. Maybe the parents or the children really have a preference for one of the parents taking them for their back to school shopping. I want this parent because they're going to help me find the best shoes for, my cross country team. Or I
Yeah.
want this parent because they have the patience to let me find the school clothes that I really, really like. And then the supplies. Again, you go back to, how you can split those expenses. Is it every other year one parent pays for the school supplies and the other parent gets them the next year? Or is it just like, hey, I know the routine. I know this local store posts the list. It's really simple. We go in, we get everything we need, and I'll just post the amount, and then please put your share into our co-parenting app if you're splitting expenses like that.
Yeah, great. And then again, yeah, if you can utilize or need to utilize an app, take full advantage of all of those features that you can. And I just kind of want to hit on the same respect part, just because, Adina, I know there's probably some listeners again who think, tried that. My co-parent does not respect me. It doesn't matter. I'm sick of being the nice one. I'm sick of being the one who is always the bigger person, that type of thing. And I would love to get your take on this, because truly what I feel and what I talk about with co-parents is that the whole let them theory. So I actually have a different version of that. It's called all of me with me, all of them with them. And it's just that reminder that we can only control our homes with our rules, with our kids, our emotions, our behaviors, and the way that we model for our kids. And I think that last one is the most important, is that we need to remember that if your co-parent is not being as respectful as you hope they would be, but you're continuously showing them respect. Is that hard? Absolutely. That's where another, again, coach or some kind of professional can help you deal with those emotions and feelings. But we need to remember that we're also modeling this for our kids, because they're watching us all of the time. So we want them to see us navigate this as best as we can, because those are the behaviors that they're going to start adapting. But again, I would love to know your take on that.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's really, really beautiful. It's hard. We tend to think, each day is a new day. If yesterday didn't go quite as well as we wanted, we get a new chance today to really show up as our best selves.
Yeah.
And anytime that, if I work with the parents too that are the ones being resisted or rejected, that what is it you're doing and what do your kids really, really need? What kind of parent do they need you to be? And if everybody's saying that you're, too laid back and not focusing on the details and not providing good care for the kids, we just say show up as the opposite. How can you bring yourself to be the best parent you can be that day for your kids, not in competition with the other parent, because parents are so different and kids need that. They need to see different kinds of parenting styles. But how can you bring your best self? And so sometimes that's doing that self-care, getting good rest, eating good, healthy meals, having a safe place to go vent if you're feeling really, really stressed about work or about your relationship with the other parent. But if you're
Yeah.
taking good care of yourself, then you can bring that energy to be your best self for your kids. And when I do the parent coaching, we talk through that of
Yeah.
if there's any complaints, any criticisms about what you're doing or how you're showing up, show up as the opposite. And we can do that through role play, so they can actually see how that might look. Why is your kid resisting? You're saying, "Oh, I want to do everything for my kid, but I don't want to pay a dime for this camp that my kid really, really wants to go to." The kids see that. They see that inconsistency. And so, how can we make that possible? How can we shift some of that energy so they see you as your whole self, as your best self, not with these inconsistencies of saying one thing and doing something different.
Yeah. Now, we're kind of wrapping up here, Dina, but something that, we've talked a lot about the communication with our co-parent and making decisions with our co-parent. And we talked a little bit at the beginning about how we need to talk with our kids too, about, what's coming, what they can expect, just to kind of get them prepared. But again, I'd love your thoughts on this of, how much should we be actually asking the kids of like, hey, where do you want to spend your summer? Do you want to spend more time at mom or dad's house? Or like how much input should we be getting from the kids?
Yeah, you definitely want to take their insights into consideration. If they haven't seen the other parent for a while, it may be this big unknown. It totally depends on their ages, their
Sure.
temperaments. You're not going to ask a 6-year-old, and the parents are going to take responsibility for that. But maybe if the kid's a little bit older, maybe they have something like marching band or cross country or something like that. And they really want to be back in town to be able to do those activities because sometimes those start up well before school starts back. So, yeah, we want to hear their thoughts and take that into consideration. We say children have a voice, but not the choice. It's up to their parents to be responsible and act like adults. I really encourage co-parents to treat each other like business partners. Most of us are out in the workplace or volunteering somewhere. We know how to treat other people with respect, like you would in the workplace or in a place where you volunteer. And treat your children's other parent with exactly that same respect. And so when we can shift from, okay, we used to be intimate romantic partners, we are no longer, maybe we split over something and have some bitterness. We have responsible ways we can take care of that, to let out those emotions in a safe space, but not directed towards the other parent, and certainly not directed towards the child who maybe has been spending time with the other parent. We may find that with some preteens or teens that they come back kind of parroting what the other parent might have said, and then the automatic trigger reaction is to treat the child with some bitterness because we're actually angry at the other parent. So
Yeah.
we want to learn appropriate ways to deal with our own emotions about things like that, clear that space so that bitterness, that anger, or even some deep shame is not interfering with our relationship with the kids, and then show up as our best selves in
Yes.
each and every day.
Yes, and I think that goes for summer and school time and beyond because you're right, just because you ended a romantic relationship, you still have a relationship with your co-parent. It just looks a lot different and acting as a business relationship can help a ton. So, Adina, thank you so much for being on today and talking about this because again, sometimes it can kind of kind of surprise us that summer's here or summer's coming, even though we've known it. It just sneaks up on us. And I think a lot of your tips definitely helped our listeners today about how they can be more prepared for themselves and with their co-parent to put the kids first in the summer decisions. And again, yes, kids love to have their voices heard. Of course, as adults and as their parents, we get the final say. But I always think it gives some really great insight as well into what's going on when we actually do ask the children, and we're not just sitting over here fighting towards each other. We're bringing in and making sure that we're doing what is best for them. So, of course, listeners can go to the show notes. They can find your website there. Your link to your member profile on the Divorce Support Collective is going to be there as well. But is there any other place that they should go to find out more information about you, Adina?
No, that sounds great. You'll have the link to the website and the information, the profile on the Divorce Support Collective. And I'm available if people are still struggling with getting their summer schedule together, or if they need a midsummer check-in, they just need to get back on track. So I'm available for that sort of either coaching or mediation.
Yeah, and again, I think that's a great reminder that even you might be finding this episode in the middle of summer and thinking, oh gosh, I wish I would have done that at the beginning, that you can still make a change. You can still pivot and adapt and make the most of the rest of your summer as well. And of course, if you're like, summer's almost over by the time I found this conversation and this discussion, you can still reach out to Adina because she can help you get prepared for the other months of the year as well. So, Adina, thank you again so much for your time today. Listeners, thanks for tuning in. And of course, we'll see you on the next discussion. Thank you for listening to the Divorce Discussions podcast. If this was helpful, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next conversation. Visit thedivorcesupportcollective.com to explore resources and connect with our professionals. Until the next discussion, remember, you don't have to navigate this alone.